Hi, my name is Dr. Terran Lupo, and I want to talk pretty frankly with you guys about should I become a doctor? I am around a lot of college kids, and I'll get this question still of, hey, should I go into healthcare? And I want to take that and kind of analyze it, and I wish someone had just been honest and truthful with me way back in the day before I invested so much time and so much money into going into practice. So this is going to basically be a large umbrella of most doctors work the same way. Like 90% of the problems I'm going to bring up are, it doesn't matter if you're a medical doctor, a chiropractor, an orthopedist, optometrist, a veterinarian, a dentist, podiatrist. It doesn't matter what kind of doctor you are. Most of the topics I'm going to address are going to deal with that. So if you're thinking about going in to be a doctor, you should really listen up. Let's go through the pros and cons. But first, before we dive in deep, if you're brand new and you've never seen me before, I do positive, inspired how-to videos. How-to videos that make your life a little better. So this is a little bit of a side direction for me, but if you like how-to videos, please check out all the other work and check out my website below. So now let's get to it. I'm going to start with the pros. What are the most common reasons people want to become a doctor? Number one is that you help people or animals, or you somehow make people's pain better or their lives better. And I think that's a very, very good thing as far as job satisfaction, that you can actually do something you feel really good about inside and you make the world a better place. So I don't really want to downplay that. That should be your number one reason for being a doctor. Number two is the respect. Doctors are the most respected profession, I think. If you look at film, media of the last 100 years, doctors are elevated to a certain professional courtesy and level of respect. People, at least back in when I was a kid, they were a lot more respectful of doctors before the internet became really easily available, that everybody can look up their own conditions and become their own doctors. But at one time, doctors were pretty revered. And I think that's attractive to some people's egos. You know, they feel good about that status symbol. Number three, the pay. Now, doctors' pays have really taken a hit the more and more government gets involved and the more bureaucratic it becomes. But you can still make a decent living as a doctor if you can figure out how to control your debt. And we're really going to get into that, because pretty much most new doctors, unless you're from like a rich family or you get help, you're going to be so loaded with debt, it's going to be hard to make a living. But there was a time where doctors were very wealthy when you could, like I talked to my friends who's a cardiologist. She went to school in the 90s, late 80s, 90s, and I think her entire loan was like $25,000, which, she's still working today, and that's nothing for a cardiologist. But if you missed that boat in the 80s and 90s, those prices are it's not like that now to go to school. So we're going to dive into that in the cons section. Let's talk about the cons of being a doctor. The number one is the time investment. Now, I went to about 9 years of higher education, between 5 years of college to get all the stuff I needed to go to chiropractic school for another 4 years. That's a big investment of time and energy. And there's a huge, I'm going to call it, lost opportunity. What I mean by that is, let's just round it off and say like 10 years. For 10 years of higher education, you are not making money. You are paying money and spending money for 10 years while everybody else is out getting jobs, advancing their careers, and making money. You are gambling that the back end is going to be the payoff. That, you're not going to make a lot of money right now, but you're going to spend a ton of money and a lot of time and effort, stress, frustration to get this piece of paper that allows you to practice. And that is a huge, huge investment. Now, if I were to look at this and just take the emotions out of it and look at it financially, you have to ask yourself this question. Would you spend 10 years of time and effort and money before you could ever make $1? Is that a smart business move? And what I mean by that, and a lot of times this happened to me, and this happened to a lot of doctors I know, they go through this, and as they're going through it, they're like, oh man, I'm 2 years in, and I don't know if I really want to do this. But I've already spent $50,000, so I guess I got to finish it. I mean, what am I going to do if I spend $50,000? I just wasted it. And I put all this time and effort, and, there's a huge amount of stress going to that kind of school. There was times where I was taking 6 and 7 tests a day. If I had had a wife during that time, I mean, all my friends, just about everybody I knew in school either got divorced or were in some sort of relationship counseling, because it just destroys families having someone focus that hard on their getting through school while, someone else is watching the kids and running the family. It's brutally hard on relationships. So there's a huge unseen cost that goes in with the amount of time it takes. The 10-year sacrifice. Before you know if you even like it, and by the time you're a year or two in, there's really no turning back without huge financial loss. So there's a lot of stakes involved. It's not like a business degree where you go in and you spend 10 grand and you're like, well, I'm going to see if I just like it, and if not, I'll switch majors. No, once you're committed to this track, you're just burning money left and right until you finish the track. So they lock you in, and that's what they count on. And there are lots of folks that never made it. Most, they don't tell you that, but as I think when I went through my school, I had a class of, I think it was around 200, and I think only about half the people actually graduated with me on time. Like, they either failed a class and got bumped back, or they got involved with real life or ran out of money and quit, and, come back a year or two later and try to earn their way through. There was all these things, but very few people make it through from start to finish at the speed you're supposed to go. And every time you mess up or you fail a class or something, it's extremely expensive, because you can't just add a class to the next semester and keep going through. You have to back up a year, a quarter. And that's very costly in time. So instead of going through school in 3.5 years, you're going to go through school in 4, or 4 years, or 4.5. It's going to add like a half a year if you fail any class. So that's a real problem, because then it affects all your student loans and how you're going to get money, because you're not full-time really in your last year, and you can't really practice, and the boards don't land there at the right times, and when everything's kind of laid out that if you stay on track, you can take this board, and your residency, and you go through, and it's a lot of juggling, but you can do it. But if you screw up during that track, or fail a board, or fail something, it massively gets expensive, because it backs you up almost a year sometimes, waiting just to take a test. So the time investment is the real deal, and I wish someone had been frank and talked to me about, how much time and what the actual cost of stress on relationships of doing that. Now, I keep lumping in these undergrad too, but most degrees, I know with my degree, there's very few states you can practice without an undergrad degree. So you have to go. That counts as part of it. And it's, of course, you got to take pretty hard undergrad classes. You got to do your physics and organic chemistry. When your friends are taking, recreation and partying, you're going to labs and class at 8 in the morning. So there is a sacrifice of fun, the fun factor. The number 2 big con, the money. Oh my gosh, is it expensive to go to school now? Now, I graduated right at the millennial. So I graduated 1999, 2000, that area, from chiropractic school, and it was $100,000 at that time. Now, when I talk to other doctors now, that price has gone up significantly. That was my entire living budget, like not only loans, but what it costs to kind of live. These days, I believe the loans are over. I looked it up on Google, and I mean, they're easily over 100,000, but they're also, you got to pretty much double that for your living expenses because you're too busy to hold a part-time job or work. The classes are too intense, especially your last 2 years where you're going through, your residency and boards and clinic and all that stuff at the same time as you're going to class. It's insane. It's insane. So realistically, I barely knew people. I mean, I had an outside job here and there, but you only make $1,000 or $2,000. It's not going to be like enough to pay for school. So the money is huge. And if you're not on some sort of scholarship or your family's not financially wealthy, you're probably going to be paying that debt your whole life. You look at doctors now, 30 years later, they're like, yeah, I make a great income, but most of it goes out the door to student loans, and you want to live because you've delayed your life for 10 years. When you first start getting paid, you're like, oh, I can finally stop eating ramen noodles and living in a mobile home. It's like I can actually have a home. And usually with doctors, because they have that delayed gratification, they go out and they spend too much money and put themselves in massive financial debt. And it's very easy to do because you'll get large money coming in and you're like, oh, I can afford it. Whatever. I'm getting 20 grand a month. I can do this. But then regulations change and all of a sudden you lose your job, or the factory that, the town you live in's factories close and you no longer have patients on your insurance plan. The insurance companies, all of a sudden Blue Cross doesn't cover you anymore, or your techniques anymore. Stuff changes, so you get used to this idea of this money coming in, and then it just vanishes overnight because of regulations. That being said, we're going to discuss a little bit too that there's more and more expensive regulations. You can't just, it's very difficult to throw down and start a practice without money. So you spent all these years in school when you could be making money and advancing some other career, gambling that you'll actually like your job when you get out, and that you'll be able to make an income. But the problem is, before you make $1, you've had to spend an enormous amount of money also on all the boards, the licensing, the testing, the insurance, the malpractice, all that stuff, before you make $1. So if you run out of money anytime during that cycle, that's it. You're never going to get the chance to make your first dollar. That's a big financial risk and a big gamble. You better have some deep pockets if you're thinking about it, or have parents with deep pockets, because if you run out of money in the middle of this, you don't get to make any money at the end. It's not what it was. Like I said earlier, my friends that went through in the 80s and 90s, $25,000 of debt. I'm at about $100,000 of debt. And I was 20 years ago. The people getting out of school now are somewhere between $200,000 and $300,000 in debt. And I'm like, how are you going to practice with that monster behind? You're just like a mortgage that you're shoveling out before you even start. It's crazy. I don't see how people can do it now without really working like as a group or working for someone. It's very hard to be solo and independent. We're going to get to that too. So let's get on to the next thing. The third big con is the environment has changed a lot. Healthcare is very, very complicated and messy now. Even 20 years ago when I practiced, you could still pretty much run the practice how you wanted to run the practice. You had to, jump through a few hoops, basic hoops. But these days, oh my gosh, the regulations and the laws, and especially if you want to take insurance or work in a government system, you have to just spend so much money to even be compliant, and so much time, and you're always retraining on, Oh, I got to go and update and find out how to put my magic codes, my magic ICD codes on the paper the right way and use the little hash so I can actually get paid. You know, you have to constantly learn all these other things that are not healthcare, and because you're just fighting government regulations. And I don't see that getting better. If anything, it's gotten worse and worse in my time. At this point, you know, I still have a license. I can practice if I want, but I'm at this point so far out of the normal system. There are cash doctors out there, and I do believe that's the future, where you just specialize in something so much that you don't get in the system. You don't take Medicare, you don't take insurance, and you are so specialized that people are willing to pay you out of their pockets for your help. Cash, they're called cash doctors. And so that system is still allowed, but in some countries it's not. And I'm worried that this will come over to the U.S. eventually, that they'll just stop allowing you to practice without forcing you to take government insurance. And that's a big problem. I know that sounds like, you know, I'm making some stuff up, but think about if you have a universal healthcare system where everybody's supposed to be covered, that they've been trying to promote, the Obamacare and stuff. That means that the doctors have to accept that insurance, no matter how poorly it pays. And I remember the big reason I didn't take Medicare at the time, I mean, you're talking 20 years ago, just for an adjustment, I think Medicare was paying $22, but it cost me per patient $25 to see someone. So, in other words, like, because of just the office regulations, chasing, you know, to get your average cost per patient, you take all of your expenses and then divide all your patients. And that's to have a staff, that's to have, you know, go and chase insurance and get paid and have someone call and chase your money. All the regulations, all the taxes and billing, all that crud, you have an average patient cost. So the government insurance paid me less than my average patient cost, what it cost. So in fact, every time I touched one of those patients, I lost a few dollars. And it opened me up to more liability to get sued because I'm treating more patients. So it made no sense to take government insurance because it was a losing proposition. Now, mind you that there are some countries that force you to take them if you like it or not. So I don't know if that's going to happen in the U.S. I do feel it's going that way, that you're going to eventually have mandatory, you have to take so many Medicare, Medicaid patients. They're going to force you to be in the system if you like it or not. Because there's so many doctors saying, I'm losing money every time I touch a patient. I'm not doing this anymore. You know what? Because the really, really good doctors see all these regulations, and I've talked to them, and some of my friends are like, you know, I've made enough. I'm going to play golf. I'm done. So all that's left, the doctors coming in, are the really desperate in-debt doctors that'll take any job. That might not be the best doctors or the highest quality doctors. They're just desperate doctors. And they will put up with this stuff and take the Medicare and Medicaid patients. So if you're going to go to a government doctor, you're going to get a much less qualified doctor, I would say. Like not as good as you could get with a cash. So there'll be two classes of doctors. There'll be doctors for rich people that pay cash, and there'll be doctors for, you know, anyone that counts on the government to take care of them. And so that's on its way. As a doctor, I would not be cool with that because I think it's forcing me to take patients that I don't want to take. And I would probably, I mean, I only part-time practice now. I would probably not practice at all if they made it mandatory that I had to take patients. And the only way to get universal health care to work is to make that happen. Because otherwise doctors wouldn't touch this stuff usually. Because there's very little money and profit in it. You're losing money when you touch these patients. So a lot of doctors would just not sign on to that. And the only answer for the government is to make it mandatory, saying, hey, you know, you're going to do this if you want to keep your license, like it or not. So just be aware, if you're thinking about going to school, this regulation and government interference is going to get worse and worse and worse. My next point is, it is really hard to be a solo practitioner now. Back in the 70s and 80s, school wasn't so expensive. You weren't coming out with just mountains of debt. You could afford to go to school, work through school, and pay your bills, and maybe save up a little to start an office. Now, offices that require a lot of equipment, like my friends that are dentists, they spend $500,000 setting up their office sometimes. Veterinarians spend a lot of money setting up. And you will notice that when you come out of school now, that almost all of them go work in groups. Because the equipment costs are so expensive, 4 or 5 veterinarians will all work in the same group and share the equipment cost and share the overhead. So you're seeing a lot more group practices. If you have the personality where you don't play nice with others and you don't like being told what to do and what you have to do, you're going to have a real hard time being one of those kind of doctors. You either got to be very wealthy that you can afford all the equipment yourself, or you're going to get fired from every place you go. And I've seen this with my friends, a couple of my friends who are doctors. They try to work for other doctors, but they have a really hard time. There's a few, I mean, you can, depending how you set your practice up, if you really, really try, you can do it on the cheap and get going as a solo practitioner, but it's very difficult. Some professions are better than others. You know, chiropractors, you can still do it. It's tough, though. Yeah, maybe like an optometrist, something like that, where it's not as much. But, you know, when you're talking, when your setup is more than $100,000 because you need x-ray equipment and you need surgical tables and things like that, it's going to be very difficult. So especially if you want to become a medical doctor, you know, most of them are tied to some sort of hospital facility, or they have to answer to somebody. And that is very, very difficult for some people because a lot of, you know, the kind of person that becomes a doctor is very headstrong and driven. A lot of type A personalities, and they don't usually work well with other people. And they're a very, very toxic environment. My friend who's a full-time cardiologist, she says it's just so unbelievably toxic because you're forced to work with people because you just can't, unless you're like at the end of your career and you have a lot of money, it's very hard to set up your own practice. And so just keep that in mind. If you're kind of the personality where you're like, you know, I'm really headstrong, you better have deep pockets if you want to be a doctor. Because if you don't play nice with others or collaborate, you're going to have a real hard time. I know it sounds like I'm discouraging you because there seems to be a lot more cons than pros. But I wish someone had been honest and straight up with me, because they kind of put rose-colored glasses to get you to sign up for med school or chiropractic school or whatever you're going to. And they really downplay all the stuff that goes with it. I mean, imagine spending 10 years of energy and money and life and getting out, and you're not even allowed to find out really if you like your job until you finish. So you have to put all this time and effort in before you make $1, and then you finally get out to your own practice for 6 months and go, man, I don't really want to do this. This is not what I thought it would be. Well, at that point, too late. You're stuck. You know, you got that huge investment, and if you stop being a doctor, people around you will freak out. They'll be like, I cannot believe you went to school. Yeah, you have to keep going. And you're not qualified to do anything else. So I sold my practice and retired kind of early years ago. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go just pick up a part-time job for fun. All I can do is chiropractic. I'm not qualified to do anything else. Like, I couldn't even get a job waiting tables because they were like, no, you're a doctor. Why would we hire you? You're going to leave as soon as, you know, you get bored. You're not going to be reliable because you don't have to, you know, you don't need this paycheck to survive. That kind of thing. No one will hire you except for what you're specialized for. Because like, okay, well, maybe I could teach, or maybe I could teach a class. Not usually. Most of the universities have PhDs already wrestling for any open spot. They're not going to hire. It's very rare when they'll hire, like, you know, chiropractor to teach anatomy or something. It's not going to happen. And so that is a downside, is you're really trained to do just one thing. Now you might do that one thing well, but if you decide you get out and a year later in practice you decide you don't like it, it's like, hey, I don't like dealing with people, or there's a cost to your sanity, which a lot of people forget to mention. And imagine that every person you talk to throughout a day is in a bad mood and they're in pain and miserable. And they're looking at you to make them better. Now, it is rewarding. Some of the job's great. Like if you can help these people and then they come in, and you see them getting better and better, that's really fun. But a lot of times you have to go in and day after day deal with negative people. And if you don't know how to ground and protect yourself, you will just get dragged down by that negative energy and vibe. It will be a lot and very difficult to deal with day after day. And so you'll see that when you do I was looking up some research for this, and Google was saying when they asked doctors if they would do it again, only 53% would say they would go into medicine again. I was like, so that's basically half the profession. 1 out of 2 people is like, no, I wouldn't do this again. And when people ask me, I'm like, unless it is your absolute life calling, like you were born wanting to be a veterinarian and this is what you want to do and this is hell or high water, you're going to be happy doing it. But those are rare people. Most people are like, well, I don't know. I kind of have like 10 different job ideas and a doctor sounds like a good idea. My parents really want me to do it. I can make good money, but if you ask them if it's their passion, if they're honest, no, they're not their passion. It's just a job that makes good money. That's how they picked it. And honestly, that's kind of what I went into. I was deciding, do I want to be a chiropractor or do I want to go to med school? Do I want to be a vet? I had all these choices. And when I went and talked to other doctors, all the medical doctors I talked to were unhappy. Like I went and talked to them and I was like, I'm thinking about going to med school. They're like, no, don't do it. Everything's changing. And then I went and talked to chiropractors, and a few chiropractors were happy with their job. They're like, yeah, it's still a good job, do it. And it was a big influence of why I decided to go that direction, was they seemed happier. But that is because they were mainly solo practitioners. Most of the people in the group stuff were not happy, or the ones that were working for a hospital were definitely not happy. So there's a sanity cost. Just keep all this stuff in mind before you make such a life-altering decision. Because once you start that road, it is very expensive to stop it. If you want to be in healthcare and make money, healthcare is still a good field for making money, but you don't necessarily have to be a doctor. There's lots of ways, and I think if I were to do it again, there's ways to be involved with healthcare without really taking on all the negative junk. And I think companies that sell doctors' equipment, medical equipment sales, things like that, jobs that revolve around servicing healthcare, there's going to be a big future in those. I think those are good jobs where you're on the edges, but you're not in it. I think that is where the future, if you're just looking to make a career and still be happy, that's where I would go. The other things I would look at is the unseen costs. This is what I keep talking about. There's a huge unseen cost. I went to school and spent money for 10 years. Why? I knew people who started a career, built a business, and were basically ready to sell their business in 10 years and retire. So if you're just looking to make money, there's much better ways to do it than to go into healthcare. Start a business. Instead of going, don't even go to college. Go start a business. Make money doing a business. Or go to a trade school. Trade schools are awesome. Go to a trade school. Go learn to be a jeweler. Go learn to fix an air conditioner. Or be a plumber. Something like that. Such a better way to make money than being a doctor. Honestly, you'll be done practically with your career by the time you would have gotten a practice off the ground and up and going, and without all that debt. The debt is going to kill you guys. So don't take on the debt unless you're really, 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 really 100% sure that's what you want to do with your life. If you're just kind of surfing in, it's going to be a big mistake. Where you're just like, oh, I'll do it because everybody wants me to do it. And you're going to quit. And I dealt with this myself personally. There's a lot of burnout in the profession. I burned out and just didn't see patients for years. I was done with it. Healthcare. I was tired of people coming to me with problems. Now, years later, I'm okay. I've made peace with a lot of it, and I can see some patients now, but I never want to go full-time again. I never want to have a big practice again. I just want a nice, peaceful life with a little, I see a couple patients, help out a few people, and that's it. So if I could hit the reset button, I wouldn't have done it. Not what I know now. I would have found a much better way to make a living. So I hope this helped you, and it's honest. And I'm sure the comments in this thing is going to blow up with people being like, hey, I'm in school and I love it and it's a good job. And go ahead, say what you want to do, because once you invest that kind of money, it's like you have to say you love it. I'm hoping people are actually really honest, because when you get doctors alone, they don't talk like that. But when they're talking to, other people, they're like, I love my job. But when they talk to other doctors, they don't. So I just want you to know what you're getting into, and I wish people had been straight up with me like I'm being with you right now. So comment away. Comment all you like, and add your 2 cents. Because, every kind of doctor is a little different. The things I said might not apply 100% to every doctor. But they all kind of have these things in common, though, for the majority. That being said, I'd appreciate it if you check out my website. My website, lupotv.com. You can find videos you cannot find that are unlisted, or private videos that you have to sign up for a newsletter to see. But everything's completely free over there. It's just a way to check out all my other stuff. And if you like how-to videos, please check out my channel and subscribe. I'd appreciate it. Anyway, keep watching these stories popping up, and I'll be back and see you around for some other exciting how-to videos.